How do, ladies, gentlemen, and others? I'm Royston Charmaine. How are you doing? Welcome to List 8, where, would you believe, I'm going to list 8 things. That's right, every time I do one of these shows, I'm going to think of 8 things that fit into a general theme, and then I'm going to waffle about each of them for a bit. Today, we're going to look at 8 artists who, despite critical acclaim and or commercial success, never followed up on their first album, sticking with just the one. Sometimes this was due to choice, but more often due to circumstance. So in chronological order from oldest to newest, here are 8 artists who only ever released one album. Derek and the Dominoes, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, 1970. 100 critic score, 81 user score. This album is by far most famous for its lead single Layla, something that the album's title doesn't even attempt to hide. A song that I rated a perfect 100. If you somehow have made it this far without hearing that song, then go and do that now. Pause the video, don't leave this tab, go into a new tab and play that song. Trust me. Derek and the Dominoes came to be in the late 1960s at the peak of founder Eric Clapton's fame. Something he often struggled with and was seeking anonymity from. And whilst he did find that anonymity briefly, he also found a real opportunity to bond with his bandmates, something he hadn't been able to do whilst being a solo act, hiring musicians. And he got a creative freedom being able to create music without his name being directly attached. Layla was famously inspired by Clapton's real-life love of Pattie Boyd, Clapton's good friend George Harrison's wife at the time. Rumours of their affair never went away, and they did indeed marry some years after this song. The song is commonly regarded as one of the best ever made, as indeed by me, as I said earlier. But the album as a whole is legendary in its own right. So why no follow-up? The deaths of Clapton's friend Jimi Hendrix and friend and collaborator Duane Allman, alongside the album underperforming somewhat, saw Clapton's drug use worsen into 1970, and the band dissolved without ever writing another song. Sex Pistols, Never Mind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols, 1977. 100 critic score, 76 user score. Founded in 1975, the Sex Pistols quickly became the flag bearers of the burgeoning underground London punk scene, with their look and their attitude quickly becoming iconic. They cemented themselves as part of the counterculture by swearing on live TV in 1976, on the BBC no less. That is something that at the time was absolutely not done. They followed this up by releasing a single called God Save the Queen on the Queen's Silver Jubilee, and the song, it's not a cover of the national anthem, it's a very viciously anti-monarchy song. All of this meant that by the time they were ready to release their debut album in 1977, they had become the most censored music act in British history, with all BBC and most independent radio stations refusing to play their songs. Despite this, the album hit number 1. Is that the Streisand effect? Is that what that is? I could Google it, but I'm not going to. I think it is, right? Also in 1977, bassist Glenn Matlock was replaced by Sid Vicious, a man who could not play bass. The reason stated for this switch was that Matlock declared that he liked the Beatles, something that was seen as ferociously uncool by the rest of the band. In actuality, singer Johnny Rotten wanted a crony on his side to help settle band arguments, as Steve Jones and Paul Cook would often side together against Rotten. Whilst Sid would bring even more of a cool punk aura to the band, alongside notorious girlfriend Nancy Spungen, this change would ultimately doom the band, as Sid would take his own life after allegedly taking Nancy's. The Sex Pistols over the years would reunite occasionally with Glenn Matlock reinstated to the bass, but they'd never release another album. The La's, self-titled, 1990. 90 critic score, 76 user score. Commonly regarded as a vital inspiration and instigator of the second British invasion in the 80s and 90s, the La's had a troubled time releasing what little music they did. For a detailed outline of that entire story, check out Trash Theory's video on it, it's fantastic. Despite releasing the first single in 1987, the album wouldn't release until 3 years later in 1990, and even then against the wishes of band leader Lee Mavers. Mavers is unfortunately cursed with the affliction known as perfectionism. His own biggest critic, Mavers' genius songwriting was fantastic to all but him. He would slave over every note in every song, never satisfied with the quality of his work. After the album was released in a state he wasn't happy with by his label behind his back, he retreated from public life and has very seldom made appearances since. Despite this, the self-titled album and the single There She Goes are regarded as some of the best British indie music of the 80s and 90s, indeed ever. In fact, I'm going on Album of the Year and giving the There She Goes 100 right now. I'm literally going to do that now before I forget to. Mother Love Bone, Apple, 1990. 85 critic score, 75 user score. A leading light in the underground Seattle movement that would eventually birth the world-conquering genre grunge. Grunge? However you pronounce it. Mother Love Bone would only release one album before tragedy would bring them screeching to a halt. Still regarded as one of the best early grunge albums, Apple, and indeed Mother Love Bone as a whole, were propelled by the uncapped charisma of frontman Andrew Wood. But just days before the album would release, Andrew would pass away from an overdose. Whilst bandmates Jeff Ament and Stone Gossard would later go on to found the greatest band of all time, Pearl Jam, and contemporaries Alice in Chains would have one of their biggest hits in tribute to Andrew with a song entitled Wood from their 1992 album Dirt. The most direct tribute to the fallen singer would come the following year. Temple of the Dog, self-titled, 1991. 74 critic score, 81 user score. Soundgarden vocalist Chris Cornell was on tour when he heard of his friend's passing, and he immediately began writing songs. Once Homie contacted Ament and Gossard about potentially recording some of these songs, and that would become Temple of the Dog. They recruited Soundgarden and future Pearl Jam drummer Matt Cameron, as well as the rest of what would later become Pearl Jam and guitarist Mike McCready and vocalist Eddie Vedder. Now, for someone with taste like mine, this supergroup is exactly that. It's basically Pearl Jam with Chris Cornell writing and singing alongside Vedder. This is like a dream. Whilst Chris has himself also now left us, I adore listening to this album because I think it's some of his best writing and best performances. We will eventually get away from the Grim Reaper, but unfortunately not just yet. Jeff Buckley, Grace, 1994. 90 critic score, 92 user score, 93 Royce and Charmaine score. It's just there, look. And Dirt's down there too. I forgot to mention it when I brought that one up. As you can probably tell by the 93 score I gave it when I reviewed it, this is one of my favourite albums of all time. And to think I only listened to it thanks to a request from friend of the channel, Kai. How you doing, mate? Whilst the album is most famous for the cover of Hallelujah, one of the greatest covers of all time, my personal highlight on the album is the incredible song Lover You Should Have Come Over. Those two songs back to back is potentially 15 of the best minutes of music ever pressed to any sort of anything. Again, if you haven't heard either of those songs, do so now. Unfortunately, whilst working on his follow-up album, Jeff vanished whilst swimming in Wolf River, potentially having been hit by a boat. He was found 6 days later. Jeff will always be remembered for helping define the sound of the 90s and for creating one of the greatest albums of all time. Lauryn Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, 1998. 89 critic score, 91 user score. Already one of the most celebrated artists of the decade as part of the Fugees. When Lauryn Hill went solo in the late 90s, a lot was expected from her debut album, and she delivered. She became the first artist to simultaneously debut at the top of the album and singles chart in the US, and the first female to win 5 Grammys in a single year. Miseducation is still regarded as one of the best albums of the 90s and beyond, but unfortunately there'd never be a follow-up due to Lauryn's messy mental health and personal life. She even spent time in prison in the 2010s, but by then any hope of a flourishing pop career had long since gone. The simple fact is that fame never sat well with Hill, and she didn't suit it either. And controversies never left her alone, even after she mostly withdrew from public life in around 2000. But hey, never say never. She might release a second album yet. But if it were to prove too much for her mental health to support, I would prefer that she didn't. Just live a happy life, Lauryn. Please don't jeopardize that for the sake of music. You have enough all-time classics to go down as a legend already. New Radicals, Maybe You've Been Brainwashed Too, 1998. 69 critic score, 79 user score. Longtime aspiring musician Greg Alexander teamed up with former child actor Danielle Brisebois in an attempt to finally break the glass ceiling in American music, and it worked. The lead single, You Get What You Give, critiqued celebrity culture while celebrating the youth of the day. The song blew up in late 98 and thrust the band into the spotlight. But rather than fulfilling a dream for the young stars, this proved the idiom of be careful what you wish for. Before the second single, the also successful Someday We'll Know, had even released, the band had dissolved, with Alexander and Brisebois mostly retreating from public appearances. But that wasn't the end for them. They were nominated for an Oscar for a song that they wrote together, and separately have both written several hit songs each, such as Natasha Bedingfield's Unwritten and Sophie Elliott-Bextor's Murder on the Dance Floor. A pair of absolute classics of the 2000s fun pop genre. And hey, we ended on a somewhat happy note, thank goodness. That was beginning to feel a little tragic, but I guess I should have seen that coming. Of course, the reasons people don't release follow-ups to successful albums is normally going to be sad. Maybe that's on me, my bad. Anyway, tell what you thought of List 8. That's the first one of these I've ever done. Hopefully it went well. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, subscribe and hit like and all that stuff. Write a comment. You know, the things that YouTubers say. Until next time, I've been roasting Charmaine, and from me and my channel founders Trinexis, Cabbage, Kate, Hannah, Argo, Kim, and Matthew Ross. Until the future, drive safe.